let's maybe continue our conversation from earlier when we were talking about like music that we both listened to, because you asked me if I listened to Omerta.
Yeah.
And I finally did give it a chance and listen to mainly the one album they had on Spotify.
Hyperviolence?
Yeah, I was trying to remember. It was like Ultraviolence, but that's Clockwork Orange that I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
But no, what I was so struck by, I also listened to the song that was their most played on Spotify, Anti-Amorous, I think.
Yeah, that's the one that's bananas.
That song to me sounded like so many different genres in one thing that I couldn't like keep my head on straight. Like the way that I put it to Paige at one point was I said there were parts of that song that sounded like a heavy version of early Panic at the Disco. And then it sounds like, all of a sudden it's like some real like, kind of death metal, just real in your face kind of stuff. But what do you interpret all that as in terms of like, I think it's a real Gen Z, like TikTok type of music, because it's like it captures your attention span that way.
And that's a trend that we're seeing in a lot of like the different types of, like we were talking about the Callous Cowboys earlier. Mathcore, I think in particular, as far as like metal subgenres are going, which is really just only, metal that's like characterized by like, changing tempos, like spastic, like type stuff. We're seeing like kind of like a lot of modernization, like, from like previous like 90s bands like Dillinger Escape Plan, like these newer bands that are doing that are like mixing in kind of like, I feel like this like fatigue with like marketing into like their style in that type of way, like mixing in like kind of like how you feel after seeing like, I don't know, like a bunch of like a TikTok that's a thirst trap and then a war crime and then like all these like random things. They're using a genre that traditionally is spastic to paint a picture of that fatigue. And I think it's genius. It's almost like more like of a relevant genre than it's ever been before, and more of a creative frontier to just be punk and throw shit at the wall rather than kind of have like this image. So you were saying, there are some parts that are very Panic at the Disco. And I mean, it's what makes it unique is kind of that it's a bunch of different shit. Not that each of the shit, each of the parts is like unique. I don't know. It's a very like, that song in particular reminds me a lot of like the Japanese nu metal band, Maximum the Hormone a lot. Like a lot of like his like inflections and a lot of like the self-aware goofiness mixed in with like the e-boy TikTok trends. I don't know. It's fun. It's fun seeing people try to be exciting with marketing when marketing's whole purpose seems to just be being as derivative as possible, or, being like, we're this. It
is kind of difficult sometimes as like a fan listening to stuff like that, though, because since a song like Anti-Amorous has like 4 or 5 different parts in it that all kind of sound very different, it's hard to show it to somebody because you might like one part, or you might listen to one part and say, this will resonate with someone I know. And then when they've listened to the beginning, they're like, this isn't my music. But then you're like, wait, you got to wait a minute and a half in the song or fast forward and then you'll like it. I mean, because that's my only issue with stuff like that sometimes is that, and I mean, I have this with metal in general, that like, I will hate the beginning of a song, but then I'm like, if you just get to this one part where the guitar solo is, like, you're gonna love it. And I don't know. I mean, like, I'd say I don't really have that as much with other types of music as I do with metal. And I don't know. I thought it was a good way to maybe start the discussion just talking about Omerta, because they're like the most modern type of like heavy music I can imagine.
They call themselves a nu metal boy band. So they're already like kind of trying to like own up to like a new moniker. But there's a lot of like a band that also is in that mathcore subgenre has also kind of rebranded themselves. Like, I mean, we're seeing, it's fun. It's like, it feels so self-aware that bands are doing that. Like Mouth Breather calls himself gadget metal, and which is just, it's not a thing, but I mean, it's just like, kind of, and so that's, I don't know. Yeah, it's cool to see that type of music making an emergence, but of course there's a bunch of like 90s music that's reemerging now, which is kind of funny because, I feel like that was one of the last, decades where music felt truly authentic. So it feels like music is kind of ignoring the years of like highly processed butt rock we had to sit through as kids and being like, all right, fuck that. Let's continue where, like we left off. And I love it. I mean, like, I think that's one of the good things happening right now.
I will say something that's been like really weird and off-putting to me though, and this can happen in any genre of music. I've only been really kind of getting into heavier music for like, I listened to, bands like System of a Down when I was younger and I really liked it. Now System of a Down to me kind of is pretty goofy. I don't know. It's like I listen to some of it and it's just like it doesn't.
I grew out of them hard. Yeah.
Well, I think a lot of it is like they're. I don't know if you. I know you probably don't listen to Fish much, but one of the things that people criticize about Fish is that the lyrics are pretty. They don't make sense, or they're like oftentimes just like a goofy story out of context, and like everyone's like. People who like it are really into it. People who aren't are like, why do I care about this character named Esther who you never mention in any other song? You know, random shit like that.
Yeah.
But then where was I going with that? Basically, what I'm saying is, with a band like System of a Down, it's like, it was a weird mixture of them trying to like be profound and like, yeah, we're anti-government, anti-establishment and all that. But then it was like, they also had a song, you know, on this, like right before that where it like, it's all about trying to go to your fridge late at night to eat a frozen pizza or something. You know, it's like stuff like that where I think maybe that was part of the whole point was that they were like, it was a nihilistic, like nothing matters. Like we're going to talk about things that do matter and then talk about things that are just goofy and silly and no one cares about.
I've always had a hard time with that from them though. Like they're a really weird band for me to where I never was able to wrap my head around that. Like I like their more serious stuff.
Yeah.
Like Deer Dance or something. Or
Deer Dance is a great song. I mean, honestly, their song Science is really good off that same album, off Toxicity. And they have a few that kind of like, that get past all that. But I think the reason I brought all that up is like, that's what I used to listen to more. And then I got away from it and I was really kind of a hater of like heavier music. And I kind of, I painted a lot of it in the same genre where when it, like in the mid 2000s, when I was in middle school and high school, it seemed like there was heavy metal that was like really, really heavy. And I'm thinking, for me, that was like Slipknot is like, oh man, they're like the heaviest of the heavy. And then there was like screamo, emo, emotional, very like, I used to call stuff like that almost like relationship rock. Like, you know, where bands like Taking Back Sunday were even like super emo, but they weren't screaming really, you know, there wasn't like that element to it. But I was going to say what has struck me the most, and I want to hear what you have to say. I'm just rambling, I know. Why can metalheads be so judgmental of other types of metal sometimes? Like the main thing I see is people who are into like 80s and 90s, like old school death metal, where it, for me, kind of all seems like...
you're picking one of the worst genres, yeah.
It kind of seemed like, to me, it sounds like it's all kind of the same tempo, the same vocals, the same kind of sound throughout. And then they are often very critical of like metalcore, where they'll be like, we don't want any electronic sounds in this. We don't want any high-pitched screams, like, and they'll just hate on it. Why do you think that is?
I think it's because
there's such a pretentiousness, you know?
It's like anything at the end of the day, and it just gets co-opted by assholes. You know, it's the same thing like when you're watching like, I don't know, an Alabama football game and like, God forbid they lose. And then all of a sudden everybody's like, let's fire Nick Saban. You know what I mean? It just feels like everyone just like wants to like kind of like hinge their like identity on something, you know what I mean? And so it's not about like innovating or like the art form to some people. And I'm assuming we're talking about like, you know, like a very like small trope of human being. I'm not saying every death metal fan, obviously, or
no, not at all.
But I think the reason that it has that association is because, especially, I mean, it's just LARPing, you know, like it's just people pretending to be edgy and that type of thing. Yeah. I remember seeing some like slam metal band like album covers as a kid, and it was just like, this, you know, disgusting, you know. I mean, it's like, or, you know, I mean, a lot of my friends, you know, I like would like show me like, I don't know, like samples from like the Pig Destroyer album, and it would just be being disgusting for like, you know, just the sake of being disgusting. And I mean, I can't speak for those bands. Maybe they're making some sort of statement for themselves or whatever. But I do know that, like, you know, with like the fans of that type of thing, like, you know, you kind of, you get in this weird territory, yeah, where it's just people LARPing. And I mean, there's people LARPing with everything, you know, there's this expectation, you know.
It definitely happens in every genre. I don't mean to pick on metal, but I think my point is that for years, I painted everyone who listened to any kind of metal pretty much as like, I mean, I could see some differences, but it was weird to me when I started seeing people like hating on specific bands. I mean, like, LOL. Like, for example, sometimes it's even, and this happens in like every genre, people don't like a band just because they're popular. Like, I've gotten people acting like I'm dumb for liking Slipknot just because they're like top 20 metal. And I'm like, I mean, yeah, but it's still good though. Yeah. It's not, I mean, there's plenty of top 20 songs on the radio that are still good songs. It's just not your genre of music, you know? But
then that's what it is. I mean, they're just trying to be like super like exclusive.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? I think. And You know, especially with like emo and stuff, I think emo really, one of the reasons that's of note as far as like, you know, with like these types of people that are like more into like niche stuff is that emo made it farther than metal ever did as far as like into the mainstream and that type of thing, where there was points where like, I mean, like bands like Panic and stuff were like larger than life and everyone knew them.
I mean, technically the All American Rejects had a lot of like, I mean, anything that's just all about like relationships and it's all pretty much like from a very emotional, sad kind of point of view.
Yeah.
There's stuff, I mean, in the past that's been really big. I mean, pop punk in its own way has like emo aspects. So, I mean, and that got really big.
I mean, I definitely, see pop punk for all intents and purposes as emo. I don't see like too much of a difference of it. I've never really been too into like punk. I like punk when it's like mixed with stuff, but I can't.
That's how I feel too.
Like, I bet I would have liked it at the time, you know, if there was no other like framework for it. But I mean, that's the type of like I don't really like any music before the 90s, which I know is kind of like my hottest take. I just really don't.
Do you know what I think it is, though? I can agree on, I don't like any heavier music from before the 90s, and I think a lot of it is just because of production quality. I think the 90s is when it started to get to where you could really feel the energy that you would feel at a show in your headphones, and I think that's become even bigger now that, like, you listen to some bands in your car or like on some headphones and you're like, I feel like I'm at a show right now because of the way it's produced. But stuff from...
It felt sterile back then.
Yeah, it felt like there wasn't much of a punch to the drums and to the bass and everything. Now it feels like it's in your head already. But I kind of wanted to use something you talked about a second ago to transition into talking about some of your music.
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned emo in general, which is largely what I would kind of place the umbrella I would place your music under.
What?
Right? You're like, what if you were like, Peter, we're done with this podcast now. Like, can't believe you call my music emo.
It's not. I mean, no. I would accept emo. I mean, there's a lot of...
Well, yeah, that's just the larger umbrella I would put it under.
No,
but,
for sure.
If someone didn't know anything about your music, I'd say, it's definitely an emotionally driven music. And I was going to say, because you mentioned, death metal bands just being like ridiculously gross or violent, or not actually violent, but like displaying those things in their music and in their artwork. And I've seen things online where, I mean, basically a lot of people in their arguments for things like death metal and why it's valuable, a lot of times they do say, well, you can't look at this in the way that you look at other forms of entertainment. This is not necessarily something that people consume as a form of like, entertainment the same way other people do. It's really more like pieces of art. I mean, it's really like, should not be considered, because entertainment is supposed to have some kind of relevance to like our actual reality. And like, you hear a song and you like it a lot, and then you end up, it's like stuck in your head and you're like kind of singing it, and it's like influencing the rest of your day in a way. Whereas I feel like a lot of death metal and even a lot of emo music, and I kind of feel this way about some of your music, is that it really, I think, is best interpreted as art because of the way that it is put together and just like what it's representing. Because I think even though your stuff is obviously very, it's, personal and self-reflective and all that, I think there's a lot of emphatic statements in any death metal, emo music, anything like that might not actually be reality. It's just something that you are expressing in that moment that is... Yeah. Does that make sense? I'm going about to say it.
So, I mean, my music is definitely a lot more, I think, kind of personal, but it is still filled, for sure, with, like, I think, emphatic statements. And I'm actually, I mean, with my more recent writing and stuff, trying to do a little bit more of a better job into leaning into a direction of where I am doing a lot more storytelling and not leaning too hard into, I don't know, like, being too personal, because, I mean, you kind of have to, you don't have to market it, but I don't think you're like, you're really doing a service to yourself if you're playing something that like bums you out every night that you play it. I like the idea that, for death metal bands, that they're writing about something so cathartically far from themselves.
Yeah. That
he's not, going home and being like, man, I hate playing that fucking song, man. Just like, it reminds me of a really bad time in my life. It's like, It does. There's a root. There's a part of him in that song, but it's so far removed and so absurd that, you know, it... And I, of course, I don't write that kind of music. I'm never going to go get that far, but like away from the subject matter. But if I wrote about a character, if I, you know, like, I don't know, did things a little differently, it might be a little healthy for me because I do get fatigued from, I think, kind of playing some of those songs. Yeah.
I'd be very interested to hear that just because, I mean, like I said, a lot of the stuff I kind of knew like more about you, you know, by the time I heard you actually play the music live and everything, or just heard it in general. And so I knew where a lot of these, you know, things were coming from. And so it's very personal, like you said, and it almost does become maybe, yeah, like almost like a little bit more, I don't want to say relatable, but like if there is a character that's removed, you know?
There are 2 songs in particular that are like ridiculously hard for me to play. One of which I don't even really play anymore, and that's By Nightfall, which is on the album. Mm-hmm. That is about me being basically a drunkard and picking alcohol over my friends, mm-hmm. which, you know, obviously doesn't make me feel great or it just brings me back to a time and place of just absolute, just like helplessness and that type of thing. And then the other being Danielle, which is a song that I wrote about like the anxiety about my mother dying. I thought she was going to die. She always insisted she was going to die because she was just paranoid like that. And then she actually did. And the song took up this really weird kind of meaning after that. And both of those songs are just leave me feeling very barren and kind of empty after I'm done playing them. I remember the one set at the beginning of the year, the January show, where I just ended with the song about my mom was very kind of, you know, the one I just turned the volume up on my amp and just cut it off or whatever. That was pretty tough, but I'm trying to, you know, like I said, try to be better about that, you know, and trying to have fun with it. You know, I mean, thinking about like the Atlanta musicians you and I have kind of bonded over talking about, they're just dudes that like, you know, they make emotional music, but they make music because it's fun. And I want to find that fun in music. You know, it's my biggest mistake as a child, you know, I mean, from listening to, you know, controversial bands with like, you know, frontmans like Brand New or Daughters or these people that are just like pariahs and just, you know, like walk this line of just like, you know, like I'm miserable and I can't do anything to fix it. You know what I mean? It's like, you know, I remember listening to music like that with my mom, and those are the types of people that I would inadvertently kind of idolize, but I'm not that person myself, and it's a very, you know, kind of, I don't know, it's weird. I've learned so much about myself from making music, so I'm glad that, you know, I mean, you've learned more about me from me making music and stuff too.
I will, you know, I know that someone else will come around was, I guess would you call it more of a demo? I mean, or would you, I mean, the reason I ask is because, here's why I ask. I didn't mean for this.
Don't play it in your car. Don't play it in.
No. Here's why I ask. It was more for you to be able to get a recording of the songs out there. But there's a couple songs. I know there's a fly in here that's killing me, but we'll either snatch it or something. That's just my. No, it's distracting me too. But no, the reason I asked that is because just like when I listen to it. You did this a couple times on a couple songs where there's a little more instrumentation where like I think Princess Elysium maybe has some more like synth or something.
Microchord synths.
Yeah. And so like stuff like that, when I hear it, it's obviously not meant for every song, but like I listen to some of those songs and I go, man, this would be cool if you were able to kind of flesh out the song more with a little more instrumentation. I just think it would give it a little more there.
Absolutely.
But you know, obviously recording costs a lot of money and takes a lot of time, and it's
you have to
sometimes
work with people, which is kind of the. I mean, it was within. To answer your question, it is a demo, and it was more of like that's my Payton Flaherty. It's an album, but it's also more of just kind of a mixtape, and I was taking a lot of influence from, you know, like I Have a Nice Life, like midwife type of perspective of, you know, it's just like this is what's in my means to make right now.
Yeah.
I mean, right now, I don't even have the means to make, obviously, you know, like my dad's house burned down and the computer and the microKORG and a lot of instruments I used in that album are gone. The album's files in the computer are actually gone. It's actually a miracle that even is out like on Bandcamp and stuff.
I didn't know about all that.
But I'm fine with the obscurity, you know, of that or whatever. You know, it's just like that's the weird thing. That's the question, right? Is why do I make music? And that's been a burning thing I've had all year ever since I realized that I wasn't really a house party type player.
Well, I mean, but that is what sucks about Auburn is that there is just not a place other than and even then the house parties here largely, I mean, I obviously I'm not a current student and I don't go to the shows all the time, but from what I can tell by just like the posters, and this is not really a problem by the houses I'm talking about, it's more just like the Auburn scene. There's not a lot of music. A lot of it seems to be a bit more, I don't know how else to put it, like leaning more towards like indie or poppy kind of music. And when I say poppy, I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean that like,
yeah, I mean, it's kind of hokey. It's like involving like crowd involvement and that type of thing. It's just like, I like the idea of like, you know, kind of like you got, you know, being a music nerd myself, like I would go to shows and I would just kind of shut up and listen, or there would be something that like while I was like paying attention to it, I would feel kind of like this like, what's the word? Like connectiveness to it, you know what I mean? And so it's just like, I like to view my stuff as more suited maybe for like a poetry open mic or something, you know?
I was going to say, like, I think that there needs to be more of like a presence of like, hey, like I said before, this is art. This is not necessarily supposed to be considered like something you're going to dance to. This is not something that...
performance art, yeah.
Yeah.
I had one person...
And I love that kind of stuff. Like
one person say that one of their favorite things about my set, and I took it the wrong way at the time because it was right after the show and I was just like, were you not paying attention or whatever?
Yeah.
They were paying attention, but what they said their favorite thing about my music was the transitions, which I was kind of like, you know, like what? Like that's just me droning a note. But what they were trying to say was it was the ambience of what I was trying to create. And that by me letting it like kind of hang or something, there was like, you know, so it is more like kind of performance art or trying to illustrate a picture rather than, you know, like, come dance with me, come dance with me. That's what was so hilarious about me playing after Zeph at the January show, because there was just such like a harsh tone change between, you know, because Zeph is probably the most charismatic guy in Auburn, and is so inclusive and loving and just, you know, and I have, you know, kind of my bastardized music that I play and that type of thing. And it's, it was just so fun. I felt like that was just such like a comical but perfect like kind of contrast that night. And definitely, I mean, every show this year has definitely kind of helped me realize a lot more of what I like and what I don't. So it'll influence the future, which is great.
I mean, to be totally honest, like when I was living in Auburn before, you know, when I was in college and then before I moved to Atlanta, I always felt like a little bit of an outsider here, not in the sense of like, I was always very much so very clear with everybody that I was like, I love pretty traditional, vintage sounding like psychedelic music. I want to make that kind of music. I've really never seen like a band in Auburn that played like psychedelic music in the way that I wanted. And back in the day, I was always trying to get people kind of more into that kind of stuff. And I even was met with some criticism by some friends who were very into like, what I consider pretty mainstream indie music that I don't really like, where I would show them a song and they'd be like, this just sounds like a band ripping off the Doors. And I'd be like, no, if that's what you got from it, then like, and I'm like, you know, this indie band you're listening to is ripping off blah, blah, blah. You know, it's like, we live in such a postmodern age. I think it's kind of like,
everything's evocative of something.
Yeah, and so it's weird to me when people try to like, you know, I don't know, gatekeep on one thing or another. And in general, I guess I'm trying to relate to you in the sense that like, it is frustrating when you want to make a certain type of music, but in a place like Auburn, there's just kind of a limitation on not only who you have to play with if you want to play with other people, because I only play drums really, but also like who's going to be there to enjoy it. Because if you did make, you know, the most full version of your music that you wanted to, and then like, you know, we're trying to play it around Auburn, it's like, will there be an audience for it? And same for me, like, will there be an audience that wants to hear this psychedelic music? I don't know.
It's hard to say. I mean, I feel like with drums and bass and different instruments, it would be completely different. It would be a completely different thing. And almost kind of the thing that gives me comfort just in life in general or with music or that type of thing is that, I mean, I'm obviously not going to be doing my solo stuff forever, but the one thing that is like for certain is that, I mean, I will be trying to be involved with music forever. You know, and so, I mean, like, obviously I was in, you know, a hardcore band before I ever started like making like pretty music and that type of thing. And that was what I needed at that stage of my life. And then this like lonely kind of like, you know, emo music I'm playing right now is kind of what I need right now. You know, it's evocative of a bunch of my friends leaving me, or a bunch, you know, being on like approaching the older 20s in Auburn in a place where there isn't really a crowd for that. And you're just kind of, you feel very like isolated. And so that's evocative of like what I need right now. But yeah, hopefully if, like my mental health gets better, I don't know, maybe I'll be in like a touring country band or something, you never know. And I don't know. That is the comfort that music is just a reflection of you. So if you get better, then yeah, your music will be happier too.
Since you brought up Narcissist, I will just like mention, I guess I stupidly, for whatever reason, only ever looked for Narcissist music on Spotify. And I finally the other day like looked up on Bandcamp and I was like, oh, you guys have recordings I didn't even know about for some reason. So I finally listened and I just, it was really cool hearing, because at first I was like, wait a minute, I had to check the credits to be like, that's Payton doing all the vocals and everything. It just doesn't, I've never heard that kind of music from you. And I really enjoyed it, honestly. Like I would have loved to have seen you guys live back in the day, but
I was one of those crazy dumbasses that would be shirt off, just like running into the crowd and like pushing people.
But but the thing is like Auburn doesn't have anything even close to that. So like it needed something that was like intense, you know? It
was it was a first band type of thing. I mean, we sucked, but we had the energy though, which is what made it so fun. I mean, that made me realize that, it sounds corny and like I'm like on the Care Bears to say, but a lot of the biggest part about being in a band, is really about friendship. I mean, like me, Jordan, and Dan and Dalton all love each other because of our time, like in that band. And a lot of it just became, Dan was like 10 years older than us. So, and we were all like broke service industry workers, the other three of us. So we would just come over and he'd feed us hot dogs and let us like play with his vinyl and stuff. And I mean, that was almost, sometimes that would take precedent over the music. And, I mean, we had 8 songs and played like for 15 minutes every show, but we were loud and we would get out of there before the police came. And that was just, like, it was fun. It was just fun posting up. The last show we played was in a duplex and we were really loud and we got very lucky. And I don't know, I decided my chapter with that music was over because that music was way more explicitly about like, kind of like, I don't know, like dark stuff with me.
Yeah.
Like, at a time where I felt like kind of just so ostracized from people that like I wanted to hurt myself. And then I got better. I don't know, finally hit puberty or something and kind of shed a lot of like my awkward mannerisms that I used to have as a kid that just alienated me from people. And I just realized, I was like, man, I really don't like playing these songs about hurting myself, especially for people, as we've talked about with my solo music before. I mean, like for people who are maybe not paying attention to it or something. And so I decided to take the approach of singing and, like letting people hear my words. And, I mean, I still try to use loud, quiet dynamics in what I play now. But I would love to be in a heavy band again, but I would love for it to be more about, I don't know, the government or some shit and less about me. So
I feel like you and I, since we first like met each other, which actually maybe that's a fun thing we can talk about real quick. Because for me, I knew of you through social media for a couple years because like I was living in Atlanta during the pandemic, and my friend Nathan, Nathan Coker, who you know very well, like he was working at Coffee Cat, and basically I remember, because he had worked there in college and he was working there again, and he was working with you, and he started posting photos of like hanging out with you, and just generally it was like I was getting to know you a little bit just through like seeing his Instagram. And then eventually when I found out I was like moving here, I knew that I wasn't sure if you like worked at Coffee Cat anymore or whatever, but I started working at Coffee Cat again and like showing up. And I think at first you maybe had like a little bit of like a awkwardness about me because I don't know if you remember, but I feel like I very much so was like, what's up? We should be like, kind of like, hey, I'm Peter. We should be friends. Well,
that's just me like being, kind of deeply cynical with people.
I get it. And also you can meet a lot of people and stuff in Auburn who act like they're your best friend and then they're really not. But
there's a lot of networking, going around and that type of thing. And I wouldn't have used to have assumed that you like didn't mean anything other than what you were presenting. But I mean, it's
no. I'm not faulting you. It was just funny for me because that's what social media does to you. It makes you think you know somebody that you don't know. So I was even kind of overstepping my bounds by kind of just being like, oh, well, I assume that people know me better than they do, but it's like they don't have the same, idea of social media that I do sometimes. And so basically like it was almost like, I feel sometimes like I kind of like slowly forced you to become my friend because I was just like, hey, we should hang out sometime. And then you're eventually like, all right, like that sounds okay.
See, that's crazy because I remember I feel like it was me that asked you to hang out, but
well, you probably asked me to actually like do the hanging out. I don't know. I mean,
I remember drinks at halftime. I think was like our first hangout that I remember, but I can't remember the context of that.
Yeah, and I know what you're talking about. But no, I mean, in general, I think it's just kind of like, I just want to kind of mention that because it's like, it's a funny world we live in where, you know, you really do feel like you know someone if they post enough and if you interact with them online or if you just like see their face. And then when you actually are like in person with them, that's, it's just a, you know, completely different world. And
that's the one negative thing I would say about like kind of the 90s coming back into style or like alternative music is that, I mean, I like, especially with like Auburn's music scene right now, it seems like it's like a bunch of jocks playing dress up, and that shit is just makes me hate like alternative like looking people. I just like automatically assume I'm just like, ugh, like I know what you're like, and which is bad. That's bad on me, like bad Payton for feeling that way. But it's like this learned response where I'm just like, you're probably gonna be an asshole. Like I don't know. It's just like it's tough and.
Well, and you know, it's really funny. I'm about to talk shit about something that I'm kind of like a part of. It's annoying when you're in a college town and you meet people who present to you this like alternative personality, or like the way they, you know, they have like, oh, one side of their head is shaved, they have an earring on, you know, one ear that's really funky, and they have like a tattoo.
You've seen a lot of the earring.
But then they're from Mountain Brook or some shit, you know, and I'm not. You know, I've talked shit about Mountain Brook on here before, and fuck anybody who thinks I can't talk shit about Mountain Brook some more. But
absolutely.
But what I'm trying to say is like people who they it's like, I'm not saying that your background, you know, should keep you from being like who you want to be, but I think for some people it's a phase. It's a phase on their way to like, it's just part of like going to college.
Yep.
You know, and even if it's not a phase, I just don't think that they necessarily have the right attitude like towards it all, because they're still, even though they are alternative and like free thinking and all that, they're still judgmental about, you know, for example, I mean, this is a small thing, but I don't see a lot of heavier music or love necessarily for heavier music all the time in like a scene like Auburn. So if you are into that kind of stuff, I mean, I bet Narcissist back in the day, it was kind of hard because some, you know, you told me about our friend Josh Jackson being real like supportive, but other people are probably kind of like, this isn't, you know, the same like basically John Mayer sounding knockoff band that I've heard a million times around Auburn.
You can't dance. Yeah, you can't dance to it. It's just me screaming. I mean, people would mosh and stuff, which was one of the most like impressive. I was proud I was able to get that going somehow. But I mean, our songs were so short. You know, it's just like, I don't know. It wouldn't last long, but no, yeah, Josh is the very like, probably the most unlikely ally, I feel like, but he's been the biggest blessing for sure, just like such a supportive friend in every case, and obviously you know Josh super well from having lived with him, and he's one
of the few people I've ever met that doesn't really judge people based on, you know, appearance or it like, and maybe he does in his brain, but he's always been one of those people that seems to accept everybody. And I really love that about him, because he doesn't, you know, make you feel as much like an outsider, even though in my opinion, he's probably the best like solo indie musician that's come from around here in a long time, you know?
I would agree. I think, especially like the last house show I've seen him, and especially his new material, which I mean, all of his stuff is incredibly versatile.
Oh yeah.
I think that Josh is onto something, and definitely injects enough of his personality into his music, as well as, you know, pays enough homage to his influences and that type of thing. He's very, very good.
So we're gonna get a little silly for a minute, maybe.
Get silly? Okay.
Yeah, sure. Okay, and we both work in the service industry, so we can maybe talk about. I feel like we both have plenty of these, but I experienced one recently. Do you have any pet peeves you want to talk about? Like things that people do that just like annoy you? Because
I'm a dishwasher, so I'm gonna say different things.
Yes, but I think there might be some overlap in general to like the sentiment is the same. So for me, I experienced one this past week at work where you take something to a table, you can't, you know, like where someone's supposed to be, you can't find the person who you're taking this like food or whatever to, and you're like, hey, did you guys have the slice of chocolate cake? And then they go, no, but we'll take it. And you're like, Like, do you think I'm actually going to give it to you? You know, like, and I understand, haha, funny joke, but like, to the person who is trying to complete a task at that moment, and you're just getting in the way, and you're just making them kind of dislike you more. But anyway, pet peeve of mine, do not tell a server who's trying to figure out where something's going, well, we didn't order it, but we'll take it, because my response is going to be, did you pay for it? Okay, well then it's not going to you. You know?
Yeah, I know they think that shit's funny. I mean, my coworkers think they're funny when they'll bring back dishes and they'll be like, "Oh, Merry Christmas," you know, like, "Oh, here's some presents." You know? like no one's ever said that shit to me before, and I'll be like drenched, and I'll just be like, "What the fuck?" Like, you know, just give it over here. Just like, shut the fuck up.
Well, at least okay. So back when I worked in a place before where I was a busboy, and I remember every time I took the dishes to the dishwasher, and like I get it, dishwashing is like the worst job there. But every time I would take dishes to him, which is my job, my only job is to take people's dishes to him, he would, every time even the smallest dish, he would go, like with the biggest sigh. And every time I was like, and he would kind of look at me as if it was like, I fucking hate you. And I was always like, I get it. I totally get it. Like, but you can't, I'm the messenger. Like, I didn't do any of this. I didn't eat this. I didn't order this. I don't own the restaurant, you know, anyway.
Yeah.
You know, so like there's service stuff can like, you can talk about pet peeves forever, but I mean,
there's apparently a guy that worked at a restaurant around here that Dalton, when he was working at Coffee Cat, he would bring him like, I don't know what like the deal was, or maybe it was like one of my friends that worked at the Hound. I can't remember. It was the Hound that this dude would have worked at some point in time, but he would just be like, "Nuh-uh," like, you know, like don't bring it back or whatever. You know what I mean?
Oh, like,
which is like not now, like kind of wave him off, which is awesome. I want to start doing that. Like that dude's my fucking hero. Like, I mean, I kind of, I don't know what to say. It pays the bills, you know. I mean,
no, I know.
You feel that way too, you know.
But see, some people take my complaining sometimes as like negative energy that's like not really helping.
No, I'm not.
Yeah, I know, but like to me, this kind of thing is like cathartic to get these kind of things out. Like one more pet peeve of mine from service stuff.
Go for it.
And only old people do this, which, you know, love ya, but I don't understand the point of it because y'all's timing is awful. It'll be like, hey, your total's 127. And then you're like, you know, you'll be like, your total's 127, and they give you $2. And after you've already typed in $2, and the system is like, that's what it's going to calculate change for, they're like, I have a nickel. And then you're like, how is that helping you? Like, and how is that, like, and all it's doing, and then I've had someone actually make fun of me before, like an older person, and be like, well, I guess they don't teach like basic math in schools anymore. And I said, actually, I'm very competent at basic math. I made all A's in all those classes. Really, you confused me by the timing of when you put this out there, and now my brain is all, you know, but anyway, things like that, you know, but that's just a service thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's old people are either the best or worst customers for sure. That's a very either or.
Well, anyway, if you don't have any other pet peeves to talk about, we can move on a little bit. I mean, in general, we're probably getting towards the end of, you know, I really just wanted to have you on to, you know, kind of talk a little bit about, you know, your background, which, I mean, we didn't kind of go over this specifically, but I mean, you're from Auburn. And I'm from Opelika. I think that you and I really have related a lot about that over the years, or over the past, we haven't even known each other technically for a year. Yeah. But, because growing up around here is really weird. Even if you move away like I did, you still find yourself coming back for various reasons. And it's a great area to live. But when you are into stuff like we're into, you know, like I was always a theater kid, and the most theater you're going to get around here is, you know, some really basic whitewashed kind of like bullshit. Even on the university level, I went to school at Auburn for theater, but you're still going to be influenced by what the community wants. And if the community...
There's just not enough resources.
Which is why you and I have talked about this before. What Auburn really needs is like an alternative bar, that the whole point of the bar is like, we don't do fratty bullshit here. We don't do the same old Southern Christian bullshit here. We're doing exactly the opposite of that. Like, we're going to have all the freaks and weirdos. And what I would love about something like that is that I think it would actually be more attractive than any other place that's even somewhat tried to do that around here, if their whole goal is not, hey, let's, you know, I think some places do things like, you know, they're like, we're LGBTQ friendly, but really they're like, ooh, money. This crowd doesn't have a safe haven, so we're gonna get. I think it's a lot of times.
We have seen that here.
I think it's a lot of times influenced by capitalism, and so I wish there was a place that the person who owned it is like so rich that they just don't even have to care about like the cost of things, and they're pretty much just. I know this is never gonna happen, but I'm just saying. I think that's the only way you're really gonna get like a scene kind of to really flourish here, and it's awesome to see it flourishing on a house level show. But that's pretty limiting. It can only go so far,
I think the question, like, I mean, first off, I think there's a couple of things that we would have to know if we even have that population anymore.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, because of, like I said, like trendy aesthetics and that type of thing, it's really hard to tell if there are even that many more, by definition, like alternative people anymore. And you would have to figure out a way to get touring bands to come, so there's at least some sort of excitement. But there would have to be some sort of basis for like people even knowing those bands. There would have to be, it would just have to be like a lightning in a bottle type moment. And as Auburn actively just overly gentrifies, it seems highly unlikely that it invites more people from Mountain Brook, more people from Texas, more people from all these places where, it's old money,
I'm dreaming here because I think my main thing is just that like I know that's. I'm tired of running away because I grew up around here and I really like it here in a lot of ways. And all growing up, I was like, I'm getting the hell out of here. I don't want to be here. There's nothing for me here. And then I left for a while and I was like, wow, Atlanta's awesome. It's a lot more like my style. I don't want to have to move somewhere that is ridiculously expensive and still has a lot of its own issues that,
absolutely,
like a place like Atlanta or Birmingham, they might have more people like, who I want to hang around. But then there's a million other issues that I don't want to deal with that Auburn doesn't have. So like,
yeah, true.
I just wish that there could be some kind of thing here. And I've talked about this on podcasts before. I'm sure it's getting old and tired. That something here that made it that was like a bastion of like, difference. It was just like, it was the thing that is the outlier. Is like obviously not like everything else here, Because I think even the places that try to be that still slip into the good old boy Southern bullshit.
I wish that there were more options here too. It does stink that I feel like that things are so condensed in a way where you're either with like this group of people or you're pretty much just on the fringe of it and just playing for your friends or, it's the way it goes. There's just not really any other options. And that kind of does stink when compared to Atlanta where it's so big and there's all these bars and there's all these touring bands coming through and there's all these things.
You can be a canceled band in Atlanta and still play like house shows all over the place. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I mean, because they just like, there's always going to be a crowd that's like, I don't think he did that thing he's accused of. I'm going to like have him play here, but Auburn's just a lot smaller.
No, for sure. I have a friend who had a band in Atlanta that got canceled because it was a death metal band, bringing it all full circle.
Yeah.
Back to what we were talking about at the beginning, and he named it Columbine Carcass, and he got canceled for it. And he was just complaining to me, like, the last time I saw him in person, he was just like, I don't understand. Like, that's hard, bro. Like, why did they cancel me for it? And I was just like, I don't know, dude. I don't know what you want me to say. It's like, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, Atlanta's big, for sure.
Yeah, I do miss it a lot, but then I just, I'm going to be a stereotypical person and be like, I did not like the traffic. I mean, that kind of killed my brain a lot of times. Only thing I got out of it was discovering podcasts and listening to a lot of good music,
I think you just got to be born into it. You got to be like an urban kid that's used to sitting in traffic for
Yeah, well, it's the same thing as like, if you're born here, it's really hard to move there and think that it's worth it to pay that much to live there. Because it's like, it's just so expensive that just to pay rent that it ends up being, it's hard for me because I grew up around here to, make that leap. But anyway, I feel like we, complained about Auburn enough, at least, but it's where we're from. And I feel like we can be a little critical because I think one of the reasons why I'm a little critical of it is because like I see people online and I've heard older people talk about how at times there was, more of a little bit of a scene here for certain types of alternative music or,
it's hard to be separate from that.
Well, even the Supper Club that closed down, I don't know about in the more recent years, but I know in the past they had some pretty kick-ass, like they have like big acts come through and play there. and it was considered a big deal. And I've seen videos from like, the 90s where like Auburn as a university would get like some pretty badass bands, not like heavy stuff, but like, bands to come through and play like at Jordan Hare or like at, orientation events, because it was like, I don't know, I think that might speak a little bit also to the state of like music in general, that in the 80s and 90s there was popular music that now we can still look back on and be like, that was a fucking amazing band. But then now I kind of look at stuff that's like really popular and I'm like, oh great, we have 2 Chainz coming. And I'm like, 2 Chainz is awesome, but I don't think he's gonna put on a great live show compared to like an actual band. And like, you know what I mean? Like,
you remember when somebody spread a rumor around Auburn about Soulja Boy playing here and nobody knew if it was real or like
I thought he did play at one of the frats.
See, you've heard about it, but there was somebody that told me that it was like,
I know for a
bullshit.
fact that Wiz Khalifa played maybe Lambda Chi. It was
why would they do that?
Nathan went to it. Nathan was there. He has like photos for no. I mean like Chief Keef was supposed to play here a few years ago and then he like didn't show up at the last minute. I know Riff Raff used to play at Bourbon Street. I mean, so I'm saying
what?
No, yeah, dude, you didn't know that? I remember like the Riff Raff's played Bourbon Street multiple times back when, I mean, so I'm saying even dude, do you remember Balcony Bar? I know it was before you were old enough to go, but like Balcony Bar is literally right next to Sky. It's like right above Moe's. And bands like, you know Captain Kudzu, Jackson, that's from here and everything, like he would play there and shit like that. So like there have been within the past 10 years even venues in Auburn that would host, even if it was just for like a weeknight thing, good music and everything. But they just like, or at least like, I could understand Skybar more on a level if they had popular people coming through. Because I would understand, I'd be like, oh, they had Soulja Boy come through Skybar. That makes sense why everybody wants to go there. They're like, aside from it being the music, they're also clout chasing. They want to be where Soulja Boy is. But I don't get why everybody wants to be at a place like Skybar over other places when it's like literally just the same bullshit.
Oh, that's
anyway, that's a larger conversation. Yeah. But I think you understand what I'm saying, that like, this is a place that has not always been quite as lame as it is now in terms of like, I love it that there's like younger scene here that is very much so being like, we're trying to do it ourselves. But I'm like, I think part of doing it yourself needs to also be, we want to force the local businesses to like kind of accept us in a way. Cause like when I'm looking at it, I just remember, I know this is like a small thing, but like, I mean, my friends were some of the people who kind of started the thing of Avondale playing shows back in the day. It was like, my friends in Lady Legs, I think, were some of the first people who, like, they were a good enough local band that brought a crowd, and they went to Avondale because they knew some people there, and they kind of, like, made it happen because of that.
That's still in my back pocket. I still could ask to do that, and
I feel like they're against it now, and I understand why.
No, I mean, my friend, a couple of my friends that work there are encouraging me to try.
Oh, really?
And, like, but the thing is like, I got to show out if I'm going to do it. I have to have people come out to that, and it has to be a big deal. I don't know, dude. 24 in Auburn. That's what I'm saying. It's like, it's a weird, type of thing. You would need a collective of people, like we were talking about, like of people that are coming together and making a scene to force businesses to do it. You know? Because you would have to have a local artist get the gig first, and then you would have to have people ensure that it's a good night.
Yeah.
So they do it again. And that's, we saw the last time Avondale did it was Dogwood Lung. And they have, the only person that's been allowed to play up there since has been the guitarist from Trust Company, who is from the old scene. The one I've told you about, Montgomery to Auburn pipeline, weird, play some shows in Montgomery, play some shows in Auburn, type of thing. And so those older people are all settled down. They would just come out, have cocktails, watch him play, But I'm in that awkward space where, it's just kind of like, I want to, and I still could try, but I just gotta, I'm one of those people, I really gotta feel it, if it's the right thing.
No, I understand. And honestly, the way that we got it to happen back in the day, the only reason it was really packed out was, it wasn't like one band. It was always like, I played a couple shows where it was like 4 bands in the lineup, and I was in one. It would be like 2 other local bands, and then like a band from Atlanta. So it would bring in people who maybe even didn't know any of the 3 bands that were Auburn local, but like, oh, I'm from Atlanta or I'm from Georgia and I'm buddies with this guy, and so like, basically it was a good way to kind of like get people to listen to all kinds of music that And I mean, Avondale really was like the only place when I was in school that was like, and we felt really cool because we were just like, this is to us, the coolest bar in Auburn. So for them to accept us and like promote this and everything, that's a big deal. You know, because I'd rather play a show at a place like that always than 1716 or, you know, Sky Bar. Even if it was my people in there, I wouldn't like it. But yeah, I don't want to rely on like local businesses too much because like it would be nice if there was a way you could have just like a DIY venue the way like the Firehouse is in Birmingham, where it's not really as much of a business as it is like a collective of people trying to make art happen. But you know, I think that something will happen eventually, and I, unfortunately, as much as I don't like, you know, having to rely on like, since we live in capitalism, it really does kind of take like some rich person who kind of like has enough, you know, money. Because that's all Athens really has is somewhere like Athens, they really just have some rich alumni who were creative and alternative and were like, I'm going to start a bar, you know, or, you know, a business. And that's why they have multiple venues that everybody there can play at. So, I mean, if you think about it, that's all we really need. But
they also have famous alternative bands from there.
I know, but I'm saying, but I think it's a self-fulfilling prophecy at that point. I think like once you have, because they had those early on, once you have B-52s and REM, it's easy to get, you know, of Montreal, you know, and bands like that where it's like and they end up, you know, kind of coming out of it because of those bands almost.
They also have touring bands come to Athens. That's the thing.
know. They also,
So
I do wish that we had like, I mean, even Tuscaloosa has an amphitheater. I saw Fish in Tuscaloosa and that was fucking amazing. I mean, like that, you know, anyway, let's wrap things up though on this. I mean, you can keep talking, but do you have anything you want to promote to everybody, like something to listen to or anything you have coming out?
Yeah, I have, Someone Else Will Come Around, is out now. It's my debut album / mixtape. And, yeah, I don't know. I think, I'm working on another band right now, that's loosely in the works. We don't have much for it yet, but it's going to be really noisy, and that might be more of a Birmingham, Northern Alabama thing because, we're planning to travel up for it to practice and stuff. So
nice.
Not much on that yet. It's definitely going to be heavy and nasty and gnarly, and I want to get back into that type of stuff again. Yeah, I don't know. Good to talk to you, Peter.
Yeah. No, yeah, it's been good to talk to you. Thank you so much for coming on. And like I said, I mean, like, I think this will be a good way for people to get to know you better and just kind of like, you know, get a little insight into some of your personality on, you know, how you think about everything.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm chronically misunderstood. So
I feel the same way about me.
I love to chat with people. I would love to meet you / talk to you if you would love to talk.
Well, thanks again for stopping by for the podcast. And,
for sure.
Yeah, thanks again.